Welcome to another ContinuousX episode where DLT, a tech data company, looks to solve for X in the SDLC equation. My name is Rick Stewart, Chief Software Technologist at DLT, and I'm joined here today, as always, by my co-host and colleague, Mike Fitzurka, one of our senior engineers and, might I add, expert developer. And as we continue with our new rotating co-host format, we're also joined today by our Appian account manager at DLT, Savannah Evans. Welcome, Mike and Savannah.
Thanks.
Our guest today is Jason Adolf, Vice President of Global Public Sector Business at Appian. And for those of you who hide under a technical rock, Appian provides a low-code automation platform that accelerates the creation of high-impact business applications. Many of the world's largest organizations, including agencies across the public sector, use Appian applications to improve customer experience, achieve operational excellence, and simplify global risk management and compliance. Welcome, Jason. And if you could you give our audience a little bit of your background?
Sure. Thanks for having us. And I'm glad to be here today. So I'm Jason Adolf. As you mentioned, I'm the Vice President of our Global Public Sector vertical here at Appian. I've been with Appian about 4 years. I was actually Appian's customer and partner. So I came from the integrator community. I was with a company called Serco before Appian. And in my early career, I got the privilege of working at SRA. So I've come through spending most of my time doing delivery and then switched over in mid-2016 to come onto the product side.
Terrific. Thanks. I'm going to turn the floor over to Savannah to start your inquisition, Jason. So,
Sure.
Savannah?
Thanks, Rick. So, Jason, my first question for you would be: Can you briefly explain for our audience the concept of no-code or low-code environments and how it differs from traditional application development?
Sure. And this is a question we get pretty much every day. And I think what you guys are seeing, as we are too, is every single product on the planet has become a low-code or no-code product. So, the heaviest code products you can find have some part of their website that you can type in no-code or low-code and you'll find some answer. What really the biggest difference is that, we're in the space that we're doing automation work. So workflow and case management and AI and RPA and things like that. And we're putting them together into composite applications. We're building business functionality with those tools. The biggest difference really is if you look at maybe what you would consider COTS, which is one area that we compete against, is COTS being a package thing that you just drop in and you have to do it the way that vendor wants you to do it. So if you want to do grants in COTS, you got to do your grants process the way that they've developed it. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got what you would consider kind of traditional heavy code. So .NET, Java, PHP, those kind of things. And in that case, a lot of the functions that Appian would provide you out of the box for things like workflow and document management and building, drag and drop user interfaces, rules, things like that. In a heavy code environment, you're actually having to create those things. So you're creating a workflow engine, you're creating a business rules engine, you're creating that logic and having to maintain it. So somewhere in the middle of that is this space of low code and no code. And there is actually a distinction. I mean, there are what you would consider no code products, which tend to be more for lightweight use cases. So I'm replacing an Access database. I need to do some kind of CRUD database app where I just need to update some information in a data store. And then you have low code in a number of different spectrums. And I know this is a long answer, but what you're seeing with us is we tend to focus on the high end of the low code space. So where there are mission applications. And so, we're providing capabilities that, you can do simple applications in Appian. I mean, we certainly do that. But if you looked at our customer base, you're using the components we give you to speed up the process of building what traditionally 10 years ago would have been custom coded mission systems or ERP systems. And I think, when you look at no code or low code, I think there's this kind of misconception that I should just be able to, in a no code application, go in and just click a bunch of checkbox and, poof, I've replaced my acquisition system. And that's just not, it's not not realistic. So what we're doing is trying to provide as many of those point and click functions, but also give you the ability that if you need to do that complicated stuff, heavy systems integration, some of the DevOps, functionality, if you're trying to create complex validations and things like that, that you do have a place where you can actually go and build expressions and things like that. And I think that's where the difference is. The nutshell is we tend to play on the higher end of that spectrum, where we're competing against, like I said, ERPs, COTS, custom code versus, sure we can do the less complicated stuff, but that's not really our bread and butter.
Yeah, it's kind of like a starter kit. You're starting, in the red zone, so to speak, with your platform and products.
Yeah, and the thing I would tell everybody, when we describe Appian, you'll see a lot of our marketing, we use Legos as a kind of a descriptor, right? So, the way I look at it is, so you turn on Appian and we're giving you all the basic Legos, right? So you get the green ones, the red ones, the blue ones, fine. We also have all the cool Legos. We've got the Ninja Legos and the Star Wars Legos that build those heavier, more complicated functions, right? So you're never really starting from zero. What you're starting from is we're giving you those major components that essentially allow you to use the platform. So you're getting the best of COTS, right? The security, the scalability, the quarterly upgrades and things like that. But we're also allowing you to arrange the Legos in any order that you want, knowing that all the Legos will always plug in together, right? So I think that's probably the best way to describe, that difference.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I can see how that's, very different for a developer and working within the environment, because you're assembling pieces, like you're saying, like with the Lego pieces. But how does that work or integrate with like the traditional operational environments? How do you operate a low code, no code environment?
Right. So, the thing is, I think there's also this misconception that you have to completely change your SDLC to work with a low code product. I mean, if you were to look into what we're doing, you kind of have two flavors. So you could use Appian by itself, and we give you all of the DevOps type tools, right? So promotion between environments, being able to compare objects across environments, being able to patch and merge things and such. But we also have what we call deployment automation manager, where if you already have a built pipeline using Jenkins and things like that, automated testing tools, you can either use everything we give you, or you can say within Appian, okay, I'm ready to hit the button to deploy, and that automation in Appian just sends it to whatever code promotion tool that you have. And so what I think we surprise a lot of people in, and this is also, I think, a big difference between us and some of the no-code tools is, the no-code tools specifically kind of wrap you into their environment. They're not trying to integrate you in a pipeline. They're not trying to work with other stuff in the environment. It's just, you can be no-code as long as you do what we say. We're on the opposite end of the spectrum, where we're saying, all right, you've spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars building these very complex SDLC processes. So we're just going to play nice with that. If you don't have anything, fine. If you're kind of a green field to us, that's fine. But if you've got something very sophisticated, then just use what you have. And we're just going to allow you to kind of integrate in all the various steps of that process. So, if you look at what the analysts say about us, and you tend to see this kind of dichotomy, right? So on one hand, they'll say, all right, building an Appian very simple, and you've got a lot of different roles that can contribute, but we're also giving you power user tools. So I think what we tend to find is when we go into an opportunity is you get this initial resistance from traditional software developers, because they're looking at us as, okay, this is a COTS product, right? Which means come in, change a couple of fields, and I'm done. There is some of that, but I think what we find is that developers and seasoned developers that use the product realize they have a lot more flexibility. And I think what they're getting out of it is, okay, we're giving them a palette of tools. And again, the Lego analogy, that allows them to exercise some creativity, right? So there's not, in our product, there's typically multiple ways to solve the same problem. So you're giving these developers the ability to be creative, to solve what typically are fairly complex, technical challenges in some cases.
And you're also providing, it's not just web app, you're providing like API-based services, et cetera, in your environment as well.
Yeah, and so if you look at us, and I think what we've tried to do is, there's a lot of ways to use a product like Appian. I mean, again, we can be your system of record, right? So we've got plenty of customers where we are that acronym level named, source of truth. We also have a lot of customers that sit us on top of something else they already have. So, what you're seeing, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, and I've seen some of your guests, like, the old way in the government was, I'm going to go out and buy an ERP system, and then I'm going to customize it to the point where it's no longer SAP anymore. It's, insert agency name, then SAP, right? So what the government is more doing now is saying, let's buy those tools, use them for what they're good for, and let's layer on a platform like Appian to fill in that gap. And I think a lot of it is that, especially in some of the specialized missions, I mean, we've got, Appian's largest customer is Health and Human Services. So we see a lot of regulatory systems. And so, in many cases, you'll see there is some COTS equivalent that's typically designed for the commercial sector. So the submission to the government, and then the government will try to buy that and turn it around to make it the receiver of the application, not the submitter. Right. And so more and more we're seeing the agencies use those COTS tools as the data model, because it is the way that they're going to receive the data, but using us to fill that gap of what that tool was not designed originally to do. And so I think that's another way. The third way I think, we're seeing more and more is this idea of system of systems. And you guys know this, as well as anybody. There's a lot of immovable objects in our customer environments. And especially, we got a big Department of Defense business. And, we're not going to them and saying, let's rip out your, the 10 specialized asset management systems for managing missiles and tanks. I mean, that's not what we're here for. But what if you just wanted to see all the information for, the systems in one place, right? And so we see a lot of use cases where the government will use Appian to aggregate stuff from these truly specialized mission systems that have a reason to be there, but ultimately don't serve, some higher level function because they are so specialized.
And that makes a lot of sense because, paying an SAP, not to pick on SAP, developer to make changes and customize, et cetera, is extremely expensive for the taxpayer. So, filling in or spackling their specific custom needs with a product like Appian makes a whole lot of cost beneficial sense.
Sure, and we don't have any problem. We work with SAP all the time. We work with SAP and Oracle and all those guys. I mean, they serve a very important piece of the market. I mean, they're what we consider core. And so we look at it, and many of our integrators look at it too, is we are an extension of the core. And, you guys could, just as well as I could, go find any government agency and find peripheral users of the core who just, for whatever reason, their requirements on the periphery just get pushed so far down in the bucket that they're just never going to get built in that core system. And so we provide an alternative to that where, okay, don't mess with the core, because, you look at especially in the DoD, if you're doing, some peripheral audit function or finance function, your requirements are not getting put in front of the logistics or warfighter requirements, but you still could do things better. And so you look at, a lot of these conversations we have now with, especially in defense and in places that have real heavy ERP, investments, is how do we use RPA to talk to your ERP system? How do we use APIs to talk to it? How do we, have data synchronization between those ERP systems? And that's basically every conversation we have now is that, there's some flavor of that in all of these kind of higher level use cases.
So Jason, and speaking of all of that, to those agencies that are adopting low-code development, are there complementary technologies you would recommend to help them follow wider DevSecOps initiatives?
Sure. I mean, we look at all those, especially what you hear a lot of it is, and again, this is fairly common knowledge, is they look at COTS as vendor lock. Okay. And so one of the things that we tend to promote as complementary technologies is a lot of the IT shops we work with want to have some kind of either open source presence, or they want to have, or again, they've made some investment in that pipeline. And so if I look at complementary technologies, I think it is truly those pipeline types of products. So, we work with, a lot of the Selenium-based tools for doing testing automation. We do JMeter for performance automation. We have a lot of customers that use Jira and Jenkins and Git for doing promotion between environments and doing requirements gathering and things like that to automate releases. On the security side, it is all over the map. I mean, as you guys know, within our customer environments, they own one of everything. We don't tend to get so our role in that discussion around the security part is typically advising the customers on how to make the necessary configurations either in our cloud, where we're doing the management. So we've got two cloud offerings. We've got our managed service, FedRAMP moderate cloud, and we have what we're calling Appian Government Cloud, which is our IL4 and above security cloud. We also offer the ability for customer to run it in their own cloud or on premises as well. And so I think, again, in our world, the security discussion is really, okay, your requirement is X in your environment. So here's how Appian fits into that, and here's how you would configure the product to allow that. I mean, that's probably the number one conversation that we have, tends to be around overcoming, I don't want to say security objections. We've been in a couple of our customers, the first cloud platform to talk to on-premises systems. So to actually transverse from AWS GovCloud, which is our cloud hosting environment, to the customer's private cloud or on-prem environment. And so I look at our role there as, knowing the protocols they have in place. How do we marry that up with the way Appian's cloud environment can communicate in a way that makes them comfortable? As you guys, we know, there's not really a technical problem. I mean, we can solve the technical problem of making something secure. It's the institutional risk that a lot of our customers are trying to overcome now. That's where we're spending our effort. So we're saying to you, I know you're worried. You have a valid security posture because you've got certain types of data that you're trying to keep sensitive. But we're not necessarily recommending tools. We're recommending approaches to making connections between the two environments, the environments, okay, for data flow. Truly on the DevSecOps part, if you were to look in the product itself, we have a lot of what we would consider fail-safes in the development process. So there are pre-deployment security checks. So it will go through and look to make sure that every object has defined security. It will look to show you if the security has changed between the prior version of the application and the new version of the application. It will look to see if there are conflicts between, two objects that reference each other where one has a different permission than the other. So we're putting in some fail-safes in the product at what I would consider at the application level, the role level, but we're also advising the customer on the actual perimeter level security as to how to keep the entire perimeter safe. And we're being asked to do that predominantly because, if you look at any of our marketing, one of our marketing truths for Appian is we're trying to allow you to put the data wherever you want it. So you don't have to move the data into our cloud in order to use it. You can leave it in your environment, some third-party environment. And so that tends to require these pretty broad perimeter conversations that we get involved in.
I think you also have like Section 508 compliance and some other types of tools that you built in to allow public sector agencies to get an advance on getting past their ATOs or authority to operate. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so, to specifically address 508, so we actually, our engineering team, and this is one of the nice things about being, headquartered here in Northern Virginia. So company was founded in Northern Virginia. The founders of the company, their first project was the Army. So, when we have government nuanced requirements for the product, you don't get these blank stares about, well, why would you need to do that? So our engineering team actually goes through the VPAT process for every release. So you can go to our website. At the bottom of our website, we have an accessibility tab. It shows the results of our VPAT for 20.3, and soon it will be up for 20.4. But to make it easier, we've made sure that all the components in the drag and drop interface are 508 compliant, and they work with the screen reader, and they go through that compliance. We have supplemental accessibility fields, so if you're not getting the output that you want, you can override that. And so you look at something like that as a pretty big shortcut to the build process. So many of our competitors, you've kind of got this set of tools that are what you would consider headless, so they're just engines. That requires you to then go out and build a Java application, sits on top. You got to do the testing for that. Then you have some other tools that maybe they're just Silicon Valley darlings, and so they don't get 508. They have some accessibility features, but that's not their core. And so they have to go back and either make some trade-offs, or you kind of can't use it for certain use cases. So we've tried to be as broad as possible in the way that we look at things like that from a standards perspective. But I'd also tell you that the standards discussion goes a little bit further than that. So obviously you get the benefits of things like FedRAMP, right? So that's a lower barrier of entry, but frankly, everybody's gotten that at this point. We still look at standards as a big thing in the design process, right? So, our process modeling environment is BPMN, business process model and notation compliant, and our decision modeler, same thing, DMN compliant. The reason we do that is, we tend to have a lot of business user conversations. So, our customers typically aren't the IT shop. That's not the first point of entry. We typically enter at the program level. Right. So they're using us for some mission, right? And so when we do demonstrations and you show a business user how they're going to create the application, showing them some proprietary way of, modeling out their business, it doesn't resonate, right? So we use standards that they've all seen Visio. They've all drawn the blocks and diamonds on the whiteboard, or use the standard operating procedure in a Word document. And so we just make the tools that look like that. So why make it complicated, right? So you'll see a lot within our product that we adopt a lot of the standards. We adopt Open API as an API standard, for consuming APIs. But we're doing that not because it's just cool. We're doing it because why not, right? Why make it difficult? And so you see that kind of throughout the product.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of reports, Jason, that actually show a lot of the low-code experience and the Appian year-over-year growth. Some were up at like 50% in the commercial realm or the private sector realm. Have you been seeing that in the public sector? You touched on it earlier that it's being more and more popular in the public sector because of the reasons that you mentioned earlier about having these basically connectors and these customization add-ons that are very advantageous. But the government procurement process, are you seeing that kind of growth for low-code environments in the public sector?
Yeah, and obviously we're public companies. I can't disclose anything. But if you were to, we've had a good quarter. We've had a good year, honestly, and I think a lot of that is attributed to a couple things. this technology has kind of reached the point of maturity. So, even 2 years ago, you couldn't have a conversation about low code alongside a, complex mission system. It was more of a novel idea. It just wasn't look like that. It didn't fit. And I think you had a confluence of events this year that have really put this type of technology in a position where it's just the right thing at the right time. And Appian just, for better or for worse, we're in the right place at the right time. I think there's a combination of factors. And so one is you've got, this environmental factor, right? Which is you've got COVID and so that's just caused massive disruption. But what it's done is it's forced government agencies at every level of government, state, local, federal, all over the world, to say, all right, I now have to react to things in a way that I just never was required in the past. I could just ride it out. The other thing that you have is you just got, and it's not just here in the U.S., the political climate of is so volatile that agencies now are getting, changes in mandates that no longer are laws. They're just executive actions or interpretations of policy. And, what used to be, okay, we passed a law and you got 3 years to go build this system. Now it's like, this guy's in charge today and he doesn't like, or he or she doesn't like the way that we're doing this. So I need you, agency X, to go make this adjustment. And I need you to do it next week. And they're going back and looking at these investments they've made over the last 10, 15 years in these big systems, and they can't do it. They just can't react. And so I think what you're seeing is we've come to this place where they look at Appian and we kind of show them how we build stuff and show them how they can own the changes. And they say, okay, well, I wish I had that. I wish I had that, right? I wish I could change the business rule or add a new grant program or change the workflow because we've got this new directive or something like that. And they're saying, well, why can't we have that?
Right.
Why can't I have that? And if you look at the breadth of our business, we've just seen massive growth in that for that reason. It's just you've got these compliance issues that are happening now, and these external factors that are just causing these agencies not have a choice but to react, as fast as possible. And I think that's been, very, very good for us.
So, Jason, excuse me, how does Appian support security initiatives and shifting security left into the development phase?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, when you're building an Appian, I think one of the things that we do really well is we give the developer or the designer of the application a lot of tools to do what I would consider unit testing. Okay, so we're giving them a holistic design environment where it's not just, okay, you're going to create this report or this form, but you, the designer, have been trained to do not only the form, but you've been trained on how to create the business rules that drive who can access the form. You've been trained on how to modify the security on that form so that only certain people can see certain parts of it, only certain people can save it, only certain people can view it as read-only. And so we're giving those people a lot of control over the discrete objects in Appian. So that's one part. Then on the other side, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, we're also putting in those checks and balances that when you have a distributed team of developers, obviously, everybody's all for Agile and scrums and doing these things where we're having these continuous builds. But it still doesn't 100% prevent crosstalk amongst teams, especially when you're moving at a rapid velocity. And so we have all these checks and balances when it comes time for deployment, that we've got not only the security checks, the automated security checks that we run, you've got an approval workflow that can be defined. So I'm the deployment manager in dev. I click a button that says I'm ready to deploy. This is ready to go to production. That can run through an approval process that can have any number of approval steps. And so a lot of times we'll counsel our customers, at that point you go to the CCB, you just, we give you a set of artifacts that you can share. And then, that workload can progress and move into the pipeline. But again, I think we do a really good job of enabling, the designers to have the accountability to do what they need to do, but still have that macro level security overwatch over the entire application. And then from a even higher level view of that, you've got what I would consider the administrator level, where we're talking about FedRAMP and the controls and things like that add one more layer of security. So I think in that way, there's kind of three different levels of how we're looking at it to make it kind of fail safe.
Right.
I wanted to ask about the. I know that Forrester had recently recognized Appian as a leader in the robotics process automation. Is that what is behind you right now? And maybe you could give a little more about how RPA ties into the low-code capabilities.
Yeah, so
because I really want to know what's behind you. I hope you say yes.
Just a little here. I mean, we do a lot of everybody's doing video conferences, and I do come in the office. We actually built a workforce safety app that allows us to check in, to come in the office and things like that. And so instead of sitting in my office with just a picture behind me, I took over one of the conference rooms. So behind me are actually two things. That's the big one behind me is called Baxter. That's actually a industrial robot. And to my left, that is called Rosie. That is a very cheap robotic arm we bought from Walmart and strapped a Raspberry Pi and a bunch of environmental sensors to.
Nice.
The reason, so this is not robotic process automation. What these were actually designed to do was, interestingly enough, everybody looks at us and says, okay, I saw a demo of you at this conference and, you had some cool case management stuff on the screen, and okay, I get that. So with Baxter, what we did was we actually built, Baxter is controlled through APIs. And so we built a business process flow within Appian. And so, step one might be raise your arm. Step two, turn the arm and do this. And so actually sitting in front of me are some little games that Baxter can play, but they're all orchestrated by Baxter seeing something, returning the value to Appian. Appian's decision manager tells it what to do next. And so through APIs, we're telling Baxter what to do. Rosie, on the other hand, is we actually have a little joystick, and you can drive this little, it's like a little track device. We built it as a demo for one of our federal customers, but we use some very inexpensive, $3-4 Raspberry Pi sensors, so oxygen sensors and CO2 sensors, things like the infrared sensors, and it uses a $35 Raspberry Pi. And we built a little web service that runs on the Raspberry Pi, and it transmits data back to Appian. So the joystick has a place to hold an iPhone, and so on the iPhone you have an Appian mobile app. You're rolling the thing around with the joystick. You take pictures, and you can tell it to take sensor readings, and then those sensor readings come into Appian and use it to drive case management applications. So you can imagine I'm driving this thing into a mine, and I needed to record, not a human doing it, but then we're very good at doing case management. You could strap this thing to a drone and have it go up and take pictures, bring it back into a case. And, the joke we have is, we built this for probably, $250, and, you go call one of the other guys down the street, or some of our neighbors, and they'll charge you, $55 million to build the same thing. So if you want to try it, I'm happy to give you the build spec on this. But so that was a long-winded description. But RPA. We look at RPA as a complementary technology to Appian. So we in the first quarter we bought an RPA company. We have since integrated that into the product. But robotics to us is essentially using computer bots to go out and perform the work that otherwise a human would do. And the way I tend to describe Appian is, we have this marketing kind of mantra that we call it full stack automation, right? So there's workflow, case management, AI, RPA, and decision logic. I think what we're trying to do is help our customers understand what's the right automation for the job. Because I think everybody thinks, okay, I need to go out and buy these bots to do certain, process-based steps that our platform might just do out of the box. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, there's a lot of use cases where bots are very useful. Heavy data entry, integration with systems that don't have modern APIs, doing simple decisions on behalf of a human. I mean, I'll say it. I've said this before. Government programs don't get less complex over time; they get more complex. And so, with the same workforce, ideally, what you want to do is start to move the vanilla decisions that have to be made to AI, bots, and happy path, right? The decision rules. Let it go through the happy path, and let the humans deal with those edge cases that, again, as the program gets more complicated, those humans have to spend more time thinking through the solution to something that may not exist in any way that a bot or an AI engine or a machine learning algorithm has any basis to understand. A lot of times it's interpreting policy or going to a human being and coming up with an answer. And so we look at RPA as very complementary. We're seeing it more and more in discussions, around document processing, around data entry. We see it in, again, automating of mundane tasks. You look at certain processes that we do a decent amount of work in onboarding. So, why make a human being go to the Experian website to do your credit check? What's the point of making a human do that? Or go on to the DHS website and type your I-9 information into the DHS, service. So the bot can do that, and it all can be done, synchronously. So I think from an RPA standpoint, we've made some pretty big bets here. We got a pretty compelling offering. It's unlimited bots in our offering, so we're not counting bots. But I think that integration, I think, is really interesting between all of these different automation technologies. The other thing I'd say though is we're not forcing our customers into using the Appian RPA tools. There's a lot of investment in Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere, UiPath across the government. We play nice with them. We work with those guys in building use cases, and I think we're just our RPA offering has some advantages, but there's absolutely no barrier for us to work with any of those other vendors.
Can you get Baxter to stand in line at the DMV for me? Yeah.
That'll probably raise some flags, right? we're gonna send Baxter to vote. That'll
really nice. Awesome. All right, we're at the end of our episode. Jason, we'd like to finish it off with a kind of a cheeky question. If you could do something continuously, do one thing, what would it be?
It's a good question. I'd probably ride my bike.
Oh, okay.
I know that's not feasible to do continuously, but
hard to sleep.
There's nothing that clears my head better than getting out on the bike for a while and just going out in the country and getting a ride in and clearing my head. That's probably what I would do.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and one of our better answers, I must say. So it's terrific. So unfortunately, we have to call it for this episode of ContinuousX podcast, Appian edition. So thank you, Mike and Savannah, for such probative questions, and thanks again, Jason, for your valuable time today. We hope you all enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Thank you for watching, and join us for future episodes or view our previous podcast in this series. Thank you.
Thanks.